Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a early impression video, and if you've been following the channel for a while, you know that these early impression videos are usually reserved for fragrances that I have a sample of. Somebody very kindly sent me a sample. I don't have a full bottle, but I still feel like the fragrance, well, I feel like every fragrance deserves to have a video done on it. You know, who knows? If it can even help one person, that was the whole idea, the whole point of me starting this channel, is so I can kind of put my thoughts out there. It's kind of like a documentary of my thoughts on a particular fragrance. Hopefully YouTube is up for the long term and people can go back and kind of use this as an encyclopedia to hear about kind of the fragrance and my thoughts. But this is one that was sent to me a long time ago, probably a year to a year and a half ago is my guess. And it was sent by Nissan. Nissan, I can tell just by the packaging it was sent in that these are the Nissan samples. He lives up in Canada, if I'm not mistaken. And this is one of the ones that I just sat on. I've worn it to bed multiple times. And I'll tell you what, this has become, I think, one of my favorite Francesca Bianchi creations. It's called the Black Knight. So the Black Knight came out in 2019. It came out in 2019, and it's considered to be a leathery, spicy fragrance, but really, this is a Vetiver composition, okay? It is her take on Vetyver. And of course, you know exactly what it's going to be. It's going to be Vetyver and her Orris Butter Accord, right? Which should not surprise anybody. You know, if you've been following my Francesca Bianchi reviews, which I've done half a dozen or so on the channel so far, and more to come, hopefully. I would love to smell all of her work if possible. But it shouldn't surprise you because I have given her a very hard time. I have not been too fair on, well, I've been fair, but I've been harsh on Francesca Bianchi, and I think she knows that she deserves it because some of her fragrances feel like they're lazy perfumery, but this is one that absolutely captures my heart. If you said, Ramsey, you can keep, you know, 3 or 4 Francesca Bianchi full bottles and throw everything else away, this would definitely be in the list. And maybe when I'm done with all these type reviews, even though they're just, a lot of these are off of samples because I only own one bottle that was Etruscan water, which I reviewed a couple weeks ago, or within the last couple weeks, let's say. You know, even though these are just samples, I very well may go back and do like a ranked Francesca Bianchi video later on. I think that would be a cool video to do. So one of my favorite Francesca Bianchi creations, it starts off dark, earthy, leathery, smoky. You get the idea, right? And then just imagine mixing that with kind of her overdosed Orris Butter DNA, which she's so very known for, but in the background at first, okay? In the heart of the fragrance, that Orris Butter DNA kind of comes to the forefront, which we'll talk a little bit about. And that's my favorite stage of the fragrance. But so according to the Francesca Bianchi website, they call this a gothic perfume. And I can see why they say that. Oh, it's beautiful though. If you like the type of perfumery that I do, this must be on the to sniff list for you. So this is leather, Vetyver, Artemisia, Narcissus, Orris Butter, Beeswax, Caraway, Cedarwood, Honey, Oak Moss, Patchouli, and Bulgarian Rose. That's the note listing according to Parfumo. And I'll just read you, it's an extrait, okay? 25% oil concentration is what her website says. 30 mils sells for the usual $108. I like that she does the 30 mil bottles. She does 100 mils for 235, or euros, excuse me, not dollars. But if you're not familiar, so this fragrance is actually inspired by Giovanni de Medici, who is famous for the Black Bands, okay? And the Black Bands were a company of Italian mercenaries. They were very famous apparently in the 1520s, considered some of the finest troops in Italy. Italy has seen warfare throughout the ages. You know, you go all the way back to the Romans, you go to the age we're talking about now, the 1520s. Even Napoleon got his start in the army of Italy. You know, it's just seen all of these wars over the millennia. And so in the 1520s, apparently, this black bands served the Pope, or served a couple folks, but one of them apparently were the service of the Pope, and Charles de Lannoy and the Pope, okay? So apparently they were like seen as one of the most elite fighting forces of the day. Very imperial sounding forces, right? So to my limited understanding of the situation, which I don't really understand the situation as much, but I don't know that warfare period in depth. I don't know the history of it. But from what I've read, he is kind of, and the black bands, okay, are the inspiration for this particular fragrance. So even though I don't know the history of the warfare in that time period as much, I can tell you that my imagery of the fragrance that comes to mind when I smell this is crystal clear, okay? And so if you can just imagine in your mind's eye, close your eyes, and just imagine, think of like the ancient Romans like setting up camp. Imagine what an ancient Roman encampment would look like, a military encampment, okay? Imagine these legions on patrol setting or at one of their main base camps, and think about like the mud and the dirt and the fires from the troops cooking stuff in the background, and soldiers drilling and practicing, and sweat gleaming off of their bodies. And remember, we're talking the 1520s here. Well, obviously the Romans weren't in the 15. Well, they were, but not the Romans I'm talking about. But either way, think about time long ago, right? Sweat gleaming off the bodies. They didn't have the modern electronics and all that good stuff. They didn't have the modern building capabilities. They probably haven't been properly bathed. They probably haven't taken a bath or a shower for much longer than we would go for in 2024, right? So imagine folks sharpening their swords, some reading, but all of them probably overripe from being out in the sun and working hard and sweating and all that stuff. I mean, I go to an office and do this, with my fingers all day, typing on the keyboard, and I call that work, but that's not really work. That's kind of doing a job, right? Really doing physical exertion is completely different. And so you just imagine some folks taking it easy, either because they're trying to work the other important muscle, which is the brain, or just relaxing because they're absolutely drop dead exhausted, which is probably more the case. And then you just imagine other folks inside of this encampment running around frenetically because they're trying to fulfill some order from some commander or legionary or whatever it is, right? And they want to do it with the utmost precision. That is like the perfect encapsulation of the smell of the Black Knight. Okay, so I'll read you the blurb. According to the Francesca Bianchi website, it says, "The Black Knight is a gothic, intense, sophisticated perfume inspired by the historical character Giovanni dalle Bande Nere, John of the Black Bands, an Italian condottiero, mercenary captain of the Renaissance who belonged to the glorious Medici family. I was charmed by this character for his stoic commitment to his cause, his loyalty, and his Spartan way of life." I like that. "Despite his noble origins, the perfume tries to depict the atmosphere of a military camp, starting with the smell of wild shrubs, then the smoke of the campfire, and the odor of the horse track. The evolution then delves deeper into the soul of this stern character, revealing the presence of a secret mistress with a powdery rose rounding up the deep core made of vetiver. I didn't attach any typical animalistic notes, as the intensity of the vetiver, together with the smokiness of the leather, already carries it through. I wanted to combine both the uncompromising and the human aspect of this fascinating character in a dark, medieval, meditative scent." Okay, so there you have it. So for me, this fragrance is almost literally like the answer. It's like, if you go back and watch some of my Francesca Bianchi fragrance reviews, as I said, I have been extremely harsh on her, okay? And this is almost like she took those criticisms, which this was created before all my criticisms, but it's almost like this is the answer. She could just hand this to me and go, "Here you go, Ramsey. This answers your criticisms." So she used her orris butter accord, which she overdoses in many of her fragrances over and over and over again, and that's the part that I've been the hardest on her. And here you can smell the house DNA, and that's an important facet. You can smell the house DNA, you can smell her orris butter overdose, but it's kind of what she built around the orris butter accord that I really, really like. It's like starting in the center and then building out this encampment all around it, okay? Now, there's two types of vetiver just at a very high level, and if you're not familiar with vetiver, it's basically a grass, mostly grown, it's grown all over, it's grown but mostly India is kind of home of the vetiver. They've created a very famous attar called Ruchas, which is a very dark, you can see just how dark, this is actual vetiver. And just look how dark it is, right? And you can almost see the green tilt, almost like that emerald green right there at the top, right? And so vetiver, oh, it's beautiful though. It's so deep and rich. And I often say things like, often say things like labdanum can be a perfume in its own. Vetiver can also be a perfume in and of itself, right? But there's basically two main types of vetiver. If you want kind of an in-depth dive into my vetiver collection, I did an entire "This is not a top 10 vetiver fragrance" video you can check out, okay? But some vetivers smell grassy and fresh and lemony and sparkly, and they have almost like literally you're smelling like the freshness of green grass growing. Imagine like grass being cut, and it can be sparkling and uplifting and almost literally like standing with the sun on your face after cutting the yard. You know, you're a little bit sweaty, all that good stuff, and it has that beautiful spring summer day warmth feel. Okay, it can be very refreshing as well. It can be beautiful on a summer day. Then there's the other side, the dark night of vetiver, if you will. And the vetiver used in dark night basically starts off earthy. It starts off deep and dark, almost like you took a fragrance like Encre Noire. Okay, so imagine you took something like Encre Noire, which by the way, this literally means black ink. If you've never smelled Encre Noire, or actually, I would take that a step further and say if you've never smelled a deep, dark, earthy, smoky, inky smelling resinous vetiver fragrance, do yourself a favor, spend $30, go to fragrancebuy.ca or any of the other discounters and just get a 100 ml bottle for $30, okay? I spent more on lunch today. And I know perfume prices are absolutely outrageous right now, okay? And so when you find some of these amazing deals, even if you're not a fan, I think this is a great fragrance to have for reference. If you want to smell what an amazing, dark, earthy vetiver fragrance is like, Encre Noire is like one of the reference vetivers, and its flankers are fantastic. I haven't smelled the new one, Indigo, but I can vouch for Encre Noire Sport and Encre Noire à l'Extrême, okay? And so the vetiver used here in the dark night is that earthy, deeper, darker type vetiver. But imagine you took it and blended it with something like Gucci Guilty Absolute, okay? And so you have vetiver and leather come together, and that gives it this Band-Aid smell, which you'll smell a little bit in Gucci Guilty Absolute. And I have a full review of this on the channel if you would like to check that out. And so I think sometimes when you just take leather and vetiver and put them together, sometimes you just get this Band-Aid medicinal-like byproduct. And it is here in the dark night as well, okay? It's in the dark night. So again, you have the fresher vetivers, like some of my two favorite fresher vetiver fragrances are this version of Guerlain's Vetiver. I know it's gone through a couple versions, but outside of the darker tobacco in the base, I really do think it's a fresh, sparkly take on vetiver. And Creed's original vetiver, which these two are beautiful in the summer. This is my second bottle of original vetiver, by the way. I love this stuff. Yeah, it's just a beautiful vetiver fragrance. But those are two examples of fresher vetiver. I'll review those two one day once I get around to it. There's a lot of reviews to be done on the channel. But and so I think that this vetiver that you're smelling here is much more in the vein of these darker vetivers. I showed Encre Noire. I would also mention something like Vetiver by Etro, which is maybe one of the most underrated vetivers I've ever smelled. This is a beautiful, dark, inky, earthy vetiver as well. It's so beautiful. Etro is one of the most underrated houses of all time, period. I mean, it's sad that I feel like they're kind of giving up because they're allowing now Coty to distribute their fragrances, but those old vintage Etros, they're going to go for big money one day. I really think they're worth their weight in gold. So if you're a fan of these darker vetiver scents or these leather and vetiver combinations like Gucci Guilty Absolute or the darker vetivers, I would really urge you to smell the Black Knight. If you have not smelled the Black Knight, it is something that you absolutely should smell. So imagine you take the sort of dark side of Etro's vetiver or Encre Noire and give it that deep, dark, mystical, almost like medicinal garden feel. Like, you know, you're growing these medicinal herbs in a garden, and you know the earth, the soil is tilled, and you really get that earthy, soily hit whenever you go near the garden, right? That's a little bit of the way that the vetiver smells here. And it turns, or maybe I would say, maybe it always has been having a little bit of a smoky tint to it. I wrote the vetiver turns, but you know, thinking about it now, maybe even from the very first spray, it has a little bit of a smoky tint to it. So it's almost like there is this hint of frankincense, but there's no frankincense. And as you heard in the write-up, Francesca Bianchi wrote that she didn't want to add all of these heavier animalic notes. She was going to allow the vetiver to shine on its own. And here, it's almost like the smoke is coming from the vetiver. It's not coming from this frankincense or an outside source. It's coming from within. It's coming from within the encampment, okay? So it's as if someone is walking through a field of vetiver and just lighting one strand of grass on fire here and putting it out. Another strand over there and putting it out. So you get these small little smokestacks coming from different places in the field, okay? But you're still smelling the green, but it's not just green, it's dark green. It's the smell of, it's the look and smell of the ruchas, this extremely green that's so green it's almost so dark it's almost black, right? But you can see, if you look, the green tint, right? Right? You can see the green tint right there at the top. That's kind of the feeling of the vetiver in the Black Knight. It is absolutely beautiful. I'm a huge fan of this. And so outside of the, imagine somebody walking through the field and lighting those quick fires and then putting them out. But even though the smoke is dark, like the vetiver's dark, the smoke here is dark, but it's like patchwork smoke here and there. You get a little bit of smoke here, a little bit of smoke there. And it reminded me, imagery-wise, in my head, again, I mentioned at the beginning, you know, the imagery of this is very vivid in my mind. Some fragrances just do this for me. Some fragrances feel muddled and, you know, hard to discuss and you can't pick stuff out. And some fragrances, it's like a lightning bolt. You know, it's like everything just instantly clicks and you can smell so much and see the picture like you're living it yourself. It's a very vivid picture. And so just imagine sort of soldiers huddled inside of this encampment, right? Some people may be huddled around different small fires. Some people may be cooking something over here and not over there. So if you were looking at it from a bird's eye view or from a helicopter, you would see these little fires inside of the encampment, right? I'm going back to ancient times. I'm sure now they have a dedicated kitchen and cook and all that stuff, but I just imagine back then, maybe one soldier kills a rabbit, brings it in, cooks it, it's a small little fire, that kind of thing, right? Soldiers huddled around small little fires inside of this encampment. And keep in mind, maybe it rained. You know, it's funny, in the television shows, the soldiers always look completely pristine. Even though the camp themselves looks like shit, it's all muddy and stuff, they never look dirty. They look completely clean. But in real life, I'm sure it's dirty and it stinks and it, you know, rains and there's mosquito. I mean, all this stuff that they don't even mention, you know. And so this really does have that feel to it. This outdoor encampment-like feel. Military compound. Military encampment, okay? And what's funny is that the part of the fragrance that really captures my attention, you notice I'm focusing on the vetiver first. Obviously, the vetiver is important. But you know the part of the fragrance that really captured my attention? It's her patented orris butter DNA. And it's heartbreakingly beautiful in this composition. It's almost like the buttery, powdery, makeup-y iris accord. It's not cold like an iris silver mist. It's like she used this honey patchouli combination and adds this resinous warmth to it underneath. So it's like the Dark Knight walking around this military encampment. Just imagine he's the badass, right? And by the way, when you see these people walking around like in television shows, it's like they go to the it's like they're going to the grocery store. Well, they don't have grocery stores back then, but they're going to the market, let's say, and they're just wearing their full armor, parading around. They didn't just wear their full armor around town. They didn't just wear hundreds of pounds of armor. But just imagine the Dark Knight just badass walking around the encampment, right, in his full armor. But underneath, okay, underneath, just imagine that the big bad boy Dark Knight walking around Black Knight has a beautiful heart and a beautiful soul underneath, right? Maybe he is enlightened on reading and philosophical ideas and all that stuff, right? The orris butter, this is the way I view it. I know she told the story about some chick sneaking into the encampment and being with him or whatever, but I view it as there's like something underneath the dark, heavy body suit of armor, right? And that's her orris butter accord. And as much as I've given her a hard time for overdosing it, which she does, but this is really beautiful. It's almost like, even though there's that contrast of the deep, dark, inky, earthy, smoky vetiver, you can still even make out little bits and pieces of like you know, the like skin, like the feeling of human skin underneath, and that goes even better with that analogy of the Black Knight walking around with something, you know, underneath the armor, right? Like you're getting these spots of kind of sweaty perspiration. There's a real skin-like feeling to a lot of her fragrances, and it's here as well. So maybe because it's just something to contrast her, orris accord with. But I remember the Lover's Tale had beautiful spices that highlighted the orris accord. Sticky Fingers had, the patchouli, and I really do feel like smelling this more. The Black Knight, and I've had a chance to wear this a good 3 or 4 times to bed. I mean, look how much I've used. There's almost, I don't want to say there's none left, but it's probably right here. I mean, it's probably right above where you can see. So I've used a lot of this periodically over time, wearing it before bed and stuff like that. So I do have a pretty good amount of experience with this, even though I don't have a bottle. But I think this in 2019 probably sort of inspired her to create Sticky Fingers in 2020 would be my guess, because this reminds me a lot of Sticky Fingers in the way it was created. I think her some of her fragrances share some serious similarities. I think this shares serious similarities with Sticky Fingers, but imagine in Sticky Fingers the patchouli is amped up, and here just imagine this vetiver note is what's amped up, okay? This earthy vetiver. And so I thought it would be very easy to call this a vetiver perfume. The star of the show, my favorite part of the show, is that orris butter accord. It's so gorgeous and thick, and it's even thickened more with honey. So just imagine, however thick you imagine her orris butter accord, imagine it even thicker, okay? And so, but I do think that this is the fragrance that inspired her to continue on the path with Sticky Fingers. Now, what I will say though is, even though I think the orris butter accord that she created, and by the way, I mentioned there's some floral notes in here like narcissus, okay? There's oak moss, there's artemisia, there's cedarwood. It does go woody. The vetiver note also goes woody, okay? So even though I'm saying that the orris butter, that the heart of the fragrance, my favorite part is when the heart comes in, because you can, like I mentioned earlier, the Black Knight having a heart, ha ha ha. But you can still get the deep, dark, inky, earthy vetiver, but really that orris accord is allowed to shine. And when it has, I think, a partner to contrast itself off of, you know, to give itself an echo when it shouts, when it's not just alone, which some of her fragrances, I feel like they're so overdosed that that orris butter accord feels alone. Here, it feels like it has a wingmate. It feels like it has a riding partner, you know. And she mentioned horses, and of course, in the old days of war, horses were, I mean, they were like the secret weapon, having a good cavalry, a proper cavalry charge, how they were trained. You know, you think about horses riding like the Russian Cossacks. I think that's how you pronounce that. But they were famous for riding smaller horses that were very quick, and then there were the big, heavy, brute horses, you know, the personal guard of the Russian emperor, all these different things, right? And so what ends up happening, though, is even though I think the star of the show is her orris butter, it actually does turn into a vetiver fragrance. One of the reasons vetiver and patchouli are used in big quantities in the base and the dry down of a lot of fragrances, that they last the longest. They're very long-lasting materials. So what ends up happening is, once that orris butter accord just kind of melts, it literally feels like it just blends in, right? Like you've sprayed a fragrance on and then covered yourself in that big giant armor, and so you're moving around and it's hot and all that stuff, and it's almost like it's just becoming one with your skin and your body temperature and all that good stuff. But in the end, once you get to that 4, 5, 6 hour mark, it's a couple things that end up staying. The patchouli, especially the vetiver. The vetiver is like the main big late dry down material, and that leathery horse leather thing that she talked about. And so it's like the Black Knight decides, screw it, take off all of the hundreds of pounds of armor, get on the horse and chase the enemy down himself, right? That's kind of the feeling late into the dry down. So amazing stuff is where I'm going with this. Really, really a big fan of the Black Knight, and very thankful to Nissan for sending me these beautiful, I think this is the last of the Nissan samples. So I mean, they literally almost lasted 2 years of me being able to, I didn't review them every day, of course, but pick one out occasionally and review it. So thank you, Nissan. If anyone has experience with the Black Knight, I would love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to know if your thoughts agree with mine, how you feel about her house. Francesca Bianchi is a house that always intrigues me. I love testing them, although I only own one, but this is some special stuff, especially if you're a Vetyver lover. Definitely very, very impressive stuff. Do not be mistaken. It is, and the prices are not bad. 30 mils for 108 bucks. That's not bad at all, especially nowadays. So I'm impressed. I am impressed. If you have experience with it, leave it in the comments. I love seeing your faces down below in the comments. As always, I appreciate everyone watching, commenting, liking, subscribing, all the stuff you guys do. In a perfect world, I think we may have an unboxing here later tonight or in a day or two, so we'll see if the box arrives. But more videos to come either way. So cheers, everyone. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.